Hey everyone, welcome to English Stories here. You'll find short and interesting stories that help you learn English naturally through listening and understanding. If you want to improve your English, build confidence, and speak fluently, you're in the right place. So sit back, relax, and enjoy learning English through stories.
Hello, my name is Jenny. I am a student of English literature, and today I want to tell you about my life in London. This story is not just about books or studies. It is about how I changed, how I found my voice, and how one teacher changed my life forever. I was not always confident. I was not always strong. But moving to London taught me many things. It was the beginning of a new chapter, and I never knew how much this city would shape my heart and mind. I was born in a small town in the north of England. It was quiet, simple, and everyone knew each other. My father was a taxi driver, and my mother worked in a local bakery. We were not rich, but we had enough. I was the youngest of three sisters. My two older sisters were married, and I was the only one left at home. I spent my evenings reading books, especially old English novels. Jane Austen, Charles Dickens, and the Bronte sisters became my friends. Their words made me dream of a different life, a life full of meaning, discovery, and courage. When I turned 18, I got accepted into a university in London. I still remember the moment I received the letter. I was sitting in our small kitchen when the post arrived. My heart was beating fast as I opened the envelope. When I read the words, "Congratulations, you have been accepted," I started to cry. My parents hugged me tightly. It was a dream come true, but it also meant leaving home for the first time. I was excited, but I was scared too. I didn't know anyone in London, and the city felt like a big ocean where I could easily get lost. The day I arrived in London was cold and gray. I stepped out of the train station with my suitcase and a map in my hand. Tall buildings surrounded me. The streets were full of people rushing to their destinations. Everyone seemed to know where they were going, except me. I took a deep breath and reminded myself, "This is where your new life begins, Jenny. Don't be afraid." I took a taxi to my student accommodation. It was a small room with a bed, a table, and a window that showed me the city lights. I stood there, looking out, and I whispered to myself, "Welcome to London." My first few weeks were not easy. The university was huge, the lectures were fast, and the other students spoke with such confidence. I felt small and invisible. I would go to class, take notes quietly, and leave without talking to anyone. I missed home. I missed the smell of my mother's baking and the sound of my father's laughter. At night, I would cry softly into my pillow and ask myself, "Did I make a mistake coming here?" But somewhere deep inside, I knew I had to stay strong. I had come here to learn, to grow, and to become the person I always dreamed of being. Everything started to change when I met Mrs. Carter, my English literature teacher. She walked into our classroom one morning with a warm smile and a kind face. She had gray hair tied in a neat bun and wore glasses that made her look very wise. But it was her voice that caught my attention. She spoke like poetry. Her words were full of life and power. Welcome to English literature, she said. This is not just a subject. This is the study of the human soul. Her words touched me deeply. I had never heard anyone speak like that before. Mrs. Carter didn't just teach us stories. She taught us how to see the world through stories. She would ask questions that made us think deeply. What does this character feel? Why did the author write this way? What does this poem tell us about love, loss, or hope? I started to look forward to her class every day. I began to raise my hand, even if I was nervous. I wanted to share my thoughts. I wanted to be seen and heard. Mrs. Carter always listened with respect. She made me feel like my voice mattered. One day, after class, she stopped me. "Jenny," she said, "you have a special way of understanding stories. I read your essay on Wuthering Heights. It was beautiful. You see things that others don't." I felt tears in my eyes. No one had ever said something like that to me before. She continued, "I think you have the heart of a writer. Don't hide it. Let it shine." That evening, I went back to my room and wrote in my diary, "Mrs. Carter sees me. Maybe I am not invisible after all." Inspired by her words, I started to write more. I would sit by the window at night and write poems, short stories, and thoughts about my day. Sometimes I would even write letters to my younger self, telling her to be brave and keep going. I also joined the university's literature club. At first, I was quiet, but with time, I started reading my poems aloud during meetings. My hands would shake, and my voice would tremble. But I did it. And slowly, people started to notice me, not just as a student, but as a storyteller. London began to feel like home. I learned how to take the tube, how to find hidden bookstores, and how to enjoy a hot cup of tea on a rainy day. I made a few friends who loved literature as much as I did. We would sit in cafes and talk for hours about books, dreams, and life. I started to enjoy walking alone through the city, watching people, listening to street music, and writing ideas in my notebook. I realized that being alone didn't mean being lonely. Sometimes it meant discovering yourself. One evening, Mrs. Carter gave us an assignment. Write a story about a moment that changed your life. I knew right away what I wanted to write about. I wrote about the day I arrived in London. I described my fear, my loneliness, and how everything began to change after I met her. I ended the story with these words: "Sometimes, a teacher doesn't just teach a subject. She teaches you how to believe in yourself." When I submitted the story, I didn't expect much. But a week later, Mrs. Carter called me to her office. She handed me my paper with a big red A+ on top. "Jenny," she said, "this story made me cry." I showed it to the head of the department. "We think you should submit it to the National Student Writing Competition." I was shocked. Me? A national competition? I had never believed I was good enough for something like that. But Mrs. Carter looked at me with such confidence. "Believe in yourself," she said again. "Your words have power. Let them fly." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about her words. I read my story again and again. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was my truth. I decided to send it. I told myself, "You have nothing to lose, Jenny. You came to London to find your voice. This is your chance." A month later, I received an email. My story was selected as one of the finalists. I would get to read it on stage in front of hundreds of people. I felt nervous, but also proud. For the first time, I felt like I truly belonged. The night of the competition was magical. I stood on a small stage, holding my paper with trembling hands. The lights were bright, and the room was silent. I looked into the audience and saw Mrs. Carter sitting in the front row, smiling at me. I took a deep breath and began to read. My voice shook at first, but then it grew stronger. Word by word, I told my story. When I finished, there was silence for a moment, and then the audience clapped. Some people even stood up. I felt my heart fill with joy. I had done it. I had found my voice. That night changed my life. I didn't win the first prize, but I won something greater: confidence. I realized that I had a gift, and it was time to share it with the world. I started a blog where I posted my stories. I received messages from people saying how my words helped them feel seen and understood. Some were students like me. Others were strangers from different parts of the world. I felt connected to them through my writing. I was no longer just a student. I was a storyteller. After the competition, something changed inside me. I was still the same Jenny, but now I saw the world with different eyes. I walked through the same university halls, but I no longer felt invisible. I had found courage, and it wasn't loud or bold. It was soft, steady, and warm, like a light quietly burning inside me. I realized something very important. I didn't just want to study literature. I wanted to live it. I wanted to use stories not just to understand the world, but to change it. And I wanted to help others find their voices too, just like I had found mine. In the months that followed, my blog grew. More and more people started reading it. I wrote about everything: my struggles, my hopes, the books I loved, and the small moments of magic I noticed in my daily life. One post I wrote was titled, "The Teacher Who Saved Me," and it was all about Mrs. Carter. I didn't mention her name, but I described how one person's belief can help someone rise. That post went viral. People from different countries wrote to me, saying they cried while reading it. Many said, "I wish I had a teacher like that." Some even said, "Your words gave me hope." I still went to classes, of course. I still studied late into the night and took exams. But now I also started volunteering at a community center. Every Saturday, I helped children who were struggling with reading and writing. Most of them came from immigrant families. English was not their first language. Some were shy, some were scared, and some had stopped believing in themselves. I looked at them and saw myself, quiet, afraid, unsure. So I told them stories. I sat on the floor with them and read books in soft, slow voices. I watched their eyes light up. I watched them slowly grow confident. And in those small, tender moments, I felt something very clear inside me. This is what I want to do. I want to teach. I want to be like Mrs. Carter. I spoke to Mrs. Carter about it one afternoon. We were sitting in the campus garden drinking tea. The sun was soft and the air smelled like new flowers. I told her everything, my dreams, my fears, my wish to become a teacher. She smiled and said, "Jenny, I always knew this path was waiting for you. The best teachers are not the ones who know everything. They are the ones who remember how it feels to be lost and choose to help others find the way." Her words stayed with me like a whisper in my heart. So after completing my degree, I applied for a teaching program. It wasn't easy. I had to write essays, do interviews, and face tough competition. But I didn't give up. I remember Jenny, who stood on that stage, shaking but brave. I remembered the girl who arrived in London with a suitcase and a dream. And I reminded myself, you are not weak. You have come so far. You can do this. When the email came that I was accepted, I cried again. But this time, they were tears of strength. I had earned this with every step of my journey. My first teaching job was in a small school in East London. It wasn't fancy. The buildings were old, and the classrooms were noisy. But the children, they were beautiful. They came from all over the world. Pakistan, Nigeria, Poland, Syria, and many other places. They brought their languages, their cultures, and their stories. And they reminded me of myself, once upon a time, trying to fit in, trying to understand, trying to be brave. I didn't just teach them grammar and reading. I taught them how to express their feelings, how to write their own stories, and how to stand tall with their words. There was one girl, Aisha, who reminded me so much of myself. She was quiet, always sitting in the corner of the classroom. She hardly spoke and never raised her hand. One day, I gave the class an assignment. Write a letter to your future self. Most of the students wrote quickly, but Aisha just stared at her paper. After class, she came to me and whispered, "Miss, I don't know what to say. I don't think my future will be anything special." Her words broke my heart. I looked into her eyes and said, "Aisha, your future is waiting for you to believe in it. Start small. Write one sentence, then another. Your story matters." The next day she handed me a letter. It was short, but full of heart. I hugged her and said, "I'm proud of you." That was the beginning of her change. Slowly, she began to smile more, speak more, and believe more. I realized something beautiful during my time as a teacher. Change doesn't always happen in loud, big ways. Sometimes it happens in quiet moments, in the way someone looks at you with trust, in the way a child writes their name with pride, in the way a shy girl finally reads her poem out loud. I lived for those moments. They reminded me why I was here. I wasn't just teaching English. I was helping souls grow. One day I received an unexpected email. It was from a publisher who had been reading my blog. They said they loved my writing and wanted to know if I had ever thought about writing a book. I was shocked. A book? Me? I didn't know what to say. But deep inside, something whispered, "Yes, you are ready." So I began to write. I wrote my story, how I left home, how I found my voice, and how stories saved me. It wasn't always easy. Some nights I cried as I wrote. Some chapters brought back painful memories. But I kept going, word by word, like building a bridge from my heart to the world. When the book was published, I held it in my hands and cried. It was called The Girl Who Found Her Voice. My students were proud. My parents were proud. And most of all, Mrs. Carter was proud. She came to my book launch and hugged me tight. "You did it," she said. "You've become what you were always meant to be, a light for others." I smiled through my tears. I had never felt more alive. Now, I travel to different schools and talk to students about writing, about courage, and about believing in yourself. I tell them, even if you feel small today, even if your voice shakes, don't stop. Your words matter. Your dreams matter. Keep going. The world is waiting for your story. And every time I say those words, I feel like I'm speaking to my younger self. The scared girl who stepped into London with nothing but hope. My name is Jenny. I am a student, a teacher, a writer, and a dreamer. I found my voice in the middle of a busy city, in a quiet classroom, through the kindness of one amazing teacher. And now, I use that voice to lift others. If you are reading this and you feel lost, remember, your journey has just begun. The road may be long, but every step counts. Believe in your story. Write it with courage, and never, ever give up.